Well, hello and welcome to the show. I have a wonderful gentleman who has invited me along to his shed today, and I'm sitting here with my friend Marcus Mahy. Buddy, thank you for having me here.
You're very welcome. I'm sorry I don't have any beard, tattoos or Crocs.
Look, it's disappointing, but something about, learning from our elders, I think. It's probably something along those lines. You're a man of wisdom and experience. And for us, croc-wearing ruffians, I thought that maybe you could share a few stories from your wise ways with us today.
I'll be happy to.
Now, Marcus, you're not from round these parts, are you, mate? You're a... You're one that we let you come and live here with the Aussies, didn't we?
I'm an import. I'm originally from Guernsey in the Channel Islands.
And for people like me who, when you told me that from, Australia, go, where the hell is Guernsey? Could you narrow that down for us?
Okay, so if you look at the northern coast of Normandy and Brittany in France, you have Mont Saint-Michel. And then about 30 or 40 kilometres away from that are the Channel Islands. So they're right in the middle of the English Channel between Guernsey and France. French by history, English by recent history.
So the English just acquired them?
Yeah.
When did they actually acquire them?
Well, technically it would be 1066 after the Battle of Hastings.
Well, not that recent.
No, but, in the grand scheme of things, you've got to remember we're talking about Europe, which goes back longer than, like the Americans' version of history, which is 20 years is a long time for them.
Same. Like, as Australians, we're pretty stoked. There wasn't much going on here in terms of the shifts that you saw in Europe. It was relatively stable here comparatively.
Yeah. So Guernsey is very small. When I describe it to people, I say, imagine Bribey Island, cut it in half, and drop 60,000 people on it.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's quite high density.
That isn't just high density, because, Bribey Island we think of as a... fairly little spot. You've certainly figured out how to explain it to us slow-talking Queenslanders, haven't you? You figured out how to dumb it right down, explain like we're five, which is what I need. So I appreciate that. Yeah, okay, so 60,000 people on something the size half of Bribey Island. And you were born there? You're...
actually born in the UK. But I was, my family's from Guernsey and I was raised in Guernsey. I only spent the first couple of weeks of my existence in the UK being born.
Slightly better hospitals?
Yes.
Gotcha. I was wondering if that was the...
Yeah, that was exactly the case.
So in terms of your family being from Guernsey, are we talking generations here?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Share with me some deep history of the Mahy family.
Well, for a start, we don't pronounce it Mahy in Guernsey.
How do we pronounce it?
We pronounce it Mahy.
Mahy.
It's French, Norman French.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been in Guernsey for 400 years. My mother's family was French in Guernsey for about 250 years.
Wow. That is a significant lineage. Is it, and again, you got to keep explaining like I'm five. Are there homesteads that are passed through generations? Is it that sort of thing, or is it different to that? How does it work?
Yeah, there are. I was raised on a small farm in Guernsey, built out of granite, hundreds of years old, but had one running tap, very little electricity. It was built in the 1600s and still kind of felt like it. So ultimately the family had to make a decision. Do you restore it or do you sell it and buy something new? And that was by far the cheaper option.
I have absolutely no doubt I can't fathom the idea of restoring a granite structure built hundreds of years ago.
Interestingly enough, the house was sold about 4 years ago, completely renovated. And the estate agent, who's an old friend, invited me to go and have a look before the new owners.
Really?
So that was quite interesting, walking around a house that I'd not been in since I was, say, 6 years old.
Wow. So you'd have glimpses of memories.
I had a good memory of where my bedroom was and where the lounge and kitchen were, but the house has changed so significantly that, you know, my memory was either not so good or things had changed so much that I didn't recognise a lot of it.
I could only imagine that if it was done by somebody now who took it over, that they did do quite a beautiful job and made it something special.
Oh, it looked phenomenal. And if it hadn't been on sale for £5 million, I might have bought it.
So look, there's a few bucks in a restored castle, who would have thought? So, but it was a farming
Yes.
property.
Yes, it was.
Because that's something that I find astonishing when I have stayed with friends and they go, oh yeah, this was built, 1200. I'm going, what? Like, we think stuff's old that was made in the 1930s or 40s around here. And, 1850s, we go, woo, that's some old colonial creation here, because we are such a young country in the scheme of things, which is very confusing to grow up in that. And then from, your side of the world where there's been so much movement of people pushing one way or another, it's so different for our lived experience. Yeah, it's very hard to sort of grasp the magnitude of it. I don't know if that makes any deal of sense.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but when you grow up in that environment, it's just normal. You accept that everything has a lot of history to it.
And your family with the farming property, was that what they did day to day? Were they?
Yeah, it was agricultural farming, so it was flowers, vegetables. We didn't have livestock.
And that was contributing, or that was subsistence? That was being sort of sold to a market? How did that?
Yeah. It was mainly flowers and tomatoes. So those would be shipped to the UK once a week. And that's how my family lived.
They must have been pretty good if they were shipping them in. Is it good soil on Guernsey or something? How on earth does that work?
Well, it's the climate.
Really?
Guernsey has a couple of degrees average temperature above the UK.
So it's not quite as terrible.
Not quite as terrible. Still not brilliant, but not quite as terrible.
Yeah, you'd still get the fairly fresh winters, I have to imagine.
Yeah, but with the extra couple of degrees, you get flowers and vegetables that are ready ahead of the UK produce.
So that's the commercial advantage. Because I was trying to wonder, I was trying to understand and go, why on earth would people farm and ship? Because I'm going, why would they buy that? But that actually now makes sense.
And that was, for years, that's how Guernsey made its money until the Dutch discovered that you could put glass houses everywhere and have exactly the same effect. So, half of Holland is now under glass.
Yeah.
And they produce most of Europe's flowers and tomatoes.
Right.
Amongst some other shady produce that comes out.
Interesting. No, of course. When was that? When did that shift happen?
Late 70s.
Late 70s. Was that devastating for Guernsey?
Yeah. Fortunately enough, they managed to move from agriculture and, their other one was tourism, but the advent of cheap travel to Spain and Portugal and Italy took away that market. But fortunately, Guernsey was able to cut out a niche for itself as a commercial centre for international finance.
Right.
Which it still is.
because it obviously had to shift because it went wearing deep doo-doo.
Absolutely. Nobody was buying overpriced tomatoes or flowers, and nobody wanted to go to Guernsey for unreliable weather when you could go to Spain and come back with a guaranteed tan.
And that is part of the selection criteria when you don't see the sun very often in that part of the world.
Yeah.
And yeah, the beaches in Spain tend to do that pretty well, don't they?
Yeah.
That would have been a brutal time. Were you still in Guernsey at that time? Because you're going to have to help me with the timeline. You don't have to share all the dates if you don't wish to pass on your precise experience.
No, it's all good.
If you're happy to share all this with me.
Most of it is now no longer a state secret. So I stayed in Guernsey until teenage years, went through the school system there, and then left Guernsey to go to the UK into the Royal Air Force.
Well, you just covered an awful lot of ground in one sentence. As a young boy, there was a local school that you would have gone to in Guernsey? That? And how many people? I mean, I know there were 60,000, so there was probably a few kids there. It probably wasn't as small as I'm imagining.
Oh, yeah. It wouldn't have been like going to school in the outback. The schools I attended would have 20, 25 people per class, and they'd have 4 or 5 classes going on at any one time.
So fairly normal in terms of what we're used to here in sunny Queensland.
Same that we have here in Wynnum, where my boy goes,
Yeah, that sort of 25 class size. And what year would you have started primary school, to apply some context?
So primary school for me would have started at 5 years old, so 1966.
1966, okay. And so you're there at primary school, and when you went all the way through your schooling?
All the way through schooling in Guernsey.
In Guernsey. And as a young man, did you have to work around the farm? What were you? What were both your commitments and the things that young Marcus did for mischief?
Well, I'd help my father occasionally in picking tomatoes or, helping out, but it was very occasionally, I have to add. My father's long gone, so I can lie as much as I want.
Absolutely. You can tell tales.
So I'd help him occasionally, but not an awful lot. I mean, I lived for being out on my bicycle, down to the beach with my mates, kicking a soccer ball around, playing cricket on the beach. Actually, the same as what you do here, really. That was what ticked young Marcus's box.
And that was something that you were allowed to do. There was no stress. It was, you were able to just jump on your bike and see you later.
It was an idyllic place for a young boy to grow up. People didn't lock their houses because there was no crime. If you had a flat tire, you just went and banged on someone's door and they let you in and they helped you out. And I suspect a lot of Australia was like that, certainly in regional Australia, So, yeah, it was a great place to be a child, to be a kid.
Sounds like a dash of utopia.
Yeah, and I think for children it is, and it's only as you get older and you realise that the world is a much bigger place and that you want to see more of it and that you're quite restricted into what you can do in Guernsey, that it becomes un-utopian. And
that would probably be the most difficult part as you do grow up and gain an understanding through your teenage years and go, hang on, I'm trapped, which interestingly is not dissimilar to what happens to people who grow up in country towns. And then they go, nah, bugger this, we're going to go to the big smoke.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound dissimilar. And what's really interesting is, I shouldn't try and put the pieces together, I should let you. But the fact that you then went and joined the military to see the world? Or was it drawn to the craft?
Well, it was the aircraft. I mean, I was an aircraft fanatic from the time I was at senior school, so 11 plus. I'd be making the model aeroplane kits that littered all over my bedroom. I got so many that I used to climb up onto my father's shed with a made Airfix kit, stuff the kit full of toilet roll, fill it with lighter fluid, set fire to it, and throw it off the shed. Dad, if you're listening, I'm sorry about that.
A few unexplained fires.
I just loved aeroplanes, and I went to boys' grammar in Guernsey as my senior school, and got in with a couple of like-minded guys who just loved aeroplanes, and so we followed everything that we could get on our one TV channel, about history of aircraft and war, and so I was pretty set from 13 or 14 years old that I knew I wanted to be around aeroplanes, and I knew that more importantly it was going to be military aeroplanes. So I only had one thing on my career list, and that was joining the Air Force.
That's reasonably extraordinary. Do you have any idea where that came from? Was there any influence within the family, or this was just something that you sought out?
Just this purely me. I mean, none of my family had been military. Well, I say none. I lost a couple of relatives in World War One, but after World War One, I'd had no family in the military.
So it really did. You just saw planes and you went, "What is this magic?
Yeah,
Teach me."
I saw jet fighters, and I just thought, I want to fly those.
That looks cool.
My life is not complete until I've flown one of those.
Because you are a man with a glint in your eye. I was driving here today, and I don't know if you've read the Clive Cussler novels, your Dirk Pitt.
Most of them.
My grandfather put me under those, and I too became an addict. You strike me as the Dirk Pitt character. You are a man with a glint in your eye, a bit of mischief, a worldly man that gets out and sees things. And I wondered with, part of your journey, because again, I imagine that you're look, I don't know if troublemaker is the right word, ringleader, had the capacity to sway mayhem.
I've been called ringleader. Mayhem has been used before, yes.
A few of those things. And I guess I was interested to know a little bit more about school-age Marcus and what he was up to. Did you enjoy school? Did you enjoy the process?
No, I didn't. I'll be brutally honest.
Please.
Your school years are supposed to be the happiest years of your life. For me, they weren't. Boys' grammar was a very old-fashioned boys-only school, and the practice of intimidation and bullying was still rife. And unfortunately, I was on the receiving end of quite a bit of it. So I still have a couple of friends from my years there that we're in contact with. They didn't enjoy the school either, but for the most part, I have no contact with the people I went to school with. It was not the best part of my life, but it was a great education. And some of the masters there taught me things which I have lived by.
Really? And so it was the children that were part of the problem, or was it the system that was part of the problem?
I think it was the children in my year. It was a particularly not rough year, that might not be the term, but difficult to explain exactly why, but it was not a nice year to be in.
And it's interesting, and I'm sorry, and I hope you don't mind me opening the door to these things, but we've explained an idyllic utopia, but children who act out, there is quite often a tendency that they've learned that at home. Was that sort of part of what you saw? Were they children that came from, I guess, perhaps very strict homes?
I'm not sure. I think because my background was predominantly from the French side of the island. The school I was at was predominantly English. In fact, 99%. There were a few of us that were from the French side of upbringing, but most of them were English, and that's where most of the problem stemmed from, I think, because I think several of us that were of French Guernsey origin had a tough time.
Right. And that was almost a nationalism style, us, them, from perhaps the...
I think so, yeah. I mean, I recall that all of the cool guys at school were from the English side, and they were cool and I wasn't.
Isn't that interesting? Because I must say I do see a lot of British people that think they're pretty cool, and I go, "Phew, we have very different descriptions of what cool is."
Yeah.
And that's all a matter of taste. That's difficult, and it's difficult because that's such a formative time, and for that to be a reasonably unpleasant time, finding, I guess, ways to escape and things to focus your attention on.
Yeah, that was another reason for me deciding that I knew I needed to leave Guernsey. And fortunately, I then moved into the Air Force. For me, that was the formative time of my life. That's when I learned about being a man, learned about being a useful person.
And talk to me about the process, having not joined the military. How does that work? What do you do as a person that went, look, this is a bit of me?
Well, it was quite easy from Guernsey because the Air Force always sent careers officers to Guernsey because the schooling system was so good that they had people with grade O and A levels exam results that they could harvest into the Air Force. So they had careers officers in Guernsey all of the time. So I just went along to a careers office and said, look, I want to fly a plane. Can I join? And they said, okay, how's your maths? I said, yeah, I've got maths A level. How's your physics? Yeah, I've got physics A level. Any others? I said, yeah, a bunch. They said, you're in. It wasn't quite that easy, but, that's how it started. So they sent me away to the UK, to Biggin Hill for officer selection, where I was told I was going to be accepted for pilot training. Went back home to Guernsey, only to be told, oh, sorry, we've just checked your medical records, and as a boy you had asthma. You can't fly a jet fighter with asthma. And I said, yes, but I don't have it now. They said, yeah, but we don't know that for sure under stress. So they said, we will have a compromise. We're going to transfer you to have an engineering apprenticeship for 3 years. If you make it through that with no signs of asthma, we will then transfer you back to flight training. So I said, yeah, fair enough.
How was that moment in time where you've known since you were 13 years old, you've been accepted, the path opened up for you, and then they said, nope?
Not very nice. I didn't handle it as well as perhaps I could. I was pretty upset.
Happy to elaborate on that?
Well...
Talk me through it. You're a young man. We've all been...
Yeah, I was 16 to be told that the only thing you ever wanted to do has just been removed. So, yeah, I was upset. But the logical side of me said, well, look, you're still going into the Air Force. You're still going to be working with aircraft. And by the time you start flight training, you're going to be a qualified engineer. So you're going to be one of the most qualified people in flight training.
And see, that's spoken with the wisdom of a man who's seen some things. But again, I'm looking for 16-year-old Marcus, glint in his eye, fire in his veins. What did that bloke say? Because I bet he said, fuck this, fuck everything, and fuck the whole lot of you.
There were teddies thrown out of the pram.
I could only imagine. Did you consider flipping the table and just walking away from all of it?
No. No, at the end of the day. And it was difficult because they sat me down in front of a couple of Air Force officers, to tell me. And I had to keep my cool and say, okay, I'm disappointed, but okay, if that's what it is, that's what it is.
And then what happened next? Talk me through it, piece by piece.
Well, then they shipped me off to the UK for basic training.
Where do you go for basic training in the UK?
It was a place called Swinderby in Lincolnshire, which no longer exists. It's like a lot of Air Force bases, it is now a housing estate. You spend 6 weeks being taught your left foot from your right foot, how to get up very early, how to make a bed very tidily, and how to have your hair cut very, very short.
Was it a pleasant time, or was it the classic break you down to build you back up again?
I enjoyed it.
Loved it.
I
Really?
I enjoyed
Because you go,
it.
I've been taking this beating from all these other dickheads for years, so bring it on, idiots.
I had an easier time in recruit training than I did at school.
Wow.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it more, and I was with guys, because there was no national service. These are all volunteers. So I was with guys who had volunteered to do it.
Want to be there.
They wanted to be there.
Makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's wild. So you would have had that epiphany as you were there going, this is me.
Then they sent me to a place called Halton in Buckinghamshire, which still exists today, and I was there just a month before last for a reunion for engineering training.
And again, what's it like there? Paint me a picture with your words, Marcus.
Well, it was in the Chiltern Hills, so it's all rolling countryside. It's part of the old Rothschild estate. So you have beautiful old, enormous brick-built buildings, brick accommodation, great big block houses, in that classic kind of turn-of-the-century Ministry of Defence style. We had great facilities. If you loved the outdoors, it was a wonderful place to be because you could go hiking in the hills or running in combats, as the PTIs would make you do once a month. And they had an airfield. So I was playing with planes. I was with people that wanted to be there, that were of the same intelligence as me, the same motivation as me, the same loves as me. It was the best time of my life.
Really sounds like it.
And they were paying me.
And they're paying you. And you're going, hang on a sec, I've found my people, I'm making friends, and I'm doing stuff that I love. And you go, what a contrast.
Well, I was placed into a group called the 131st Entry Apprentices. Every year there was a new entry taken in, and ours was 131st. There were 62 of us from memory that were taken in for that year, and I am still friends on Facebook, and of course I have to point out there are other social platforms as well. I am still friends on Facebook with 50-something of them.
Wow.
And, you have to keep in mind that a few of us are dead. So that's actually pretty good. We were a very, very close bunch, and we still are very, very close and in contact.
That is extraordinary. Did you ever share with any of the other fellas? Would they have shared, were there similar upbringings where they didn't find that they fit where they were previously and then found their place? Was that a common story?
I'm not sure that's something I've ever thought of, to be honest, but I think it would have been a common thread to quite a few of us.
Because that's extraordinary. That number of people over that duration of time from that point in existence, that's the math there, it leans towards extraordinary.
You take 60, 16-year-olds when their brains are like sponges and they're ready to be guided through life, and you have them spend 3 years together. I think any group is going to be very, very strong by the end of that period.
That's an extraordinary formative time. In terms of the work, the training, again, for somebody like me who only knows how to do colouring in, what do you actually go through? What is the process of learning?
Engineering right from the very basics. How to file, how to drill, how to cut, how to bend metal, how to rivet a piece of aluminium onto an aircraft skin. And then you start with engines, and of course the basic one would be an internal combustion four-stroke motor, how the cycle works, what all the various bits are, how to repair all the various bits, how to attach a propeller to that motor. And then you work on to jets, which, that was the part I really liked, how a jet motor works, why it works, why it gives you the extra power that it gives you. It was just a great time of life.
I have one friend in the military, and he told me 20 years ago, he said, jet engine, what did he say? Suck, whiz, bang, blow, was how he explained the jet engine to me. Is that, do I recall that reasonably correct?
Yeah.
I think they're incredible. I particularly like when people put them in a small car.
Well, the great thing is there's only two moving parts.
Really?
Yeah. The compressor and the impeller. That's the only parts that moves. Everything else is fixed. Whereas in a regular internal combustion engine, you've got a lot of bits moving
many
around.
Parts. Wow. I actually didn't realise that it was only the two.
Yeah. The impeller and the turbine, the only two bits that move.
No wonder they're so extraordinary. And they are great.
Yeah.
So I must say, I didn't fall into aircraft the way that, say, my grandfather, but the F-111s that they would run through Brisbane, and you would have seen fire now for many years, when they would pump those planes through Brisbane City up there, and then they'd do their big dump and burn where they'd just go up and just... The spectacle, the wastage, the gloriousness, that...
and the sound.
Oh.
Nothing sounds like an aircraft on full reheat. Max chat, as we used to say in the military.
Max chat.
Max chat, and that's full reheat or afterburner for people who don't understand the lingo.
No, we don't understand the lingo, but we like what it does. It was a sad, sad day when they finally retired those planes, and they couldn't do that specific manoeuvre anymore for us, because we the people gave that one the thumbs up. So with your process of engineering, extraordinary group of people, 3 years?
3 years apprenticeship, yeah. And that's when things got awkward. I received news that I was going to be transferred to flight training. And so they started me on that process. And the first thing they did, they pulled me into the medical centre and they drilled out all of the fillings in my teeth.
All right, talk me through that. There's obviously good reason. Sounds horrible, but yes.
I didn't know what it was at first. I had to ask, with a mouthful of cotton. But apparently, in an emergency decompression in an aircraft, if you have air pockets inside your fillings, they can explode. You can have exploding teeth.
Oh.
Now, civilian dentists don't worry about that. It's, because it's not part of routine. But Air Force dentists have to make sure that all fillings are compacted and air-free. So I had all my fillings drilled out.
What a terrible introduction to the thing you always wanted to do.
Yeah.
That's awful.
So I had that done. But unfortunately, before I could commence flight training, I had a motorbike accident.
Well, before we get to the obvious part, and that's bloody terrible, what sort of motorbike were you riding?
I wasn't. I was in the back of a friend's motorbike.
Well, that's even worse. So you weren't even in control. That's particularly irritating.
No, we'd been out to the pub for a beer, a couple of us, and I was on the back of a 750 F1 Honda, and we didn't make it around a corner of a country lane.
Shit.
And the rider did what I would have done. He straightened the bike up and went straight over a bank. I unfortunately got thrown off the bike against a tree, and that shattered my arm. And as I bounced back into the road, I remember I told you that there were a few of us that had gone. Well, my best mate, and we still are good friends, on his 750 F2 Honda came around the corner and collected me.
I was hoping that wasn't where that was going. But
Yeah,
that's where
and
it went. Shit, a brick. So you've bounced off a tree and then you've been over the top, like just boom, over.
I hit
Or
the tree,
into you.
bounced back into the road, and I turned my head and I saw one great big headlight, and it hit me across the head and the back.
Were you wearing a helmet at the very
of course,
least?
yeah. Or else we wouldn't be having this.
Well, I'm there
conversation.
going, hey, you're far too charming and functional to have.
Yeah, and right
Marcus.
there, my Air Force career ended.
Oh, shit, a brick.
I spent a few months in Air Force Hospital, having my back rebuilt. That was the part that was damaged the most. The left arm was fairly easy for them to fix. You know, all the bits were there. Just put them all back together. And put a load of metal around it, which is still there, and it worked okay. But backs are notoriously tricky.
Not ideal. They too, like the internal combustion engine, have a lot of moving parts.
That's it. So when I eventually got out of hospital, the Air Force said to me, well, you can fly a desk or you can take a check and go into Civvy Street. And I thought, well, if I'm going to sit behind a desk, I'll wear my own clothes and earn more money. So I said goodbye to the Air Force.
Marcus, that's about as heartbreaking a young man's story as like in terms of somebody on a path looking to do something, found your way, found your calling, found your people.
Yeah, it was a very difficult time.
Because not only would you be mourning the loss of that career, that opportunity to fly, those jet engines that make your heart sing, you're then also carrying the physical impairments. So you've had your dreams shattered, your body shattered, and once again you've had to look around and go, righto, now what?
Yep, that was pretty much it.
How long was that process of now what? Did you spend... Because that I cannot imagine any part of that was a good time.
No, it wasn't. But the Air Force were pretty good. I mean, they sent me on extended full paid leave. There was also a retired Air Force officer who was a partner in an accounting firm in Guernsey, and they put me in contact with him. And he said, "Look, come and work for us." I said, "Well, I have no experience in that." He said, "No, but you're numerate and."
Your math's pretty good, we know that.
Yeah. So
you won't be able to run away with anyone's money because you'll be too slow.
That's it. So I went straight to work in the finance industry in Guernsey.
And what year are we up to here?
1981, I believe.
1981. So you were going from the Air Force into finance, and how old are you at that time? My math isn't
I was
very good.
20.
22.
Yep.
Geez, you've seen some shit by the time you're 20, Marcus. That's
one way of putting it.
That's quite, but that is quite the roller coaster of experiences.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are back in Guernsey, so you've said toodaloo to the military.
Yeah. I'm back in Guernsey working in the finance world, and I stayed in Guernsey working in the finance world, but It was difficult being back at home in a small environment.
Back to the country town.
Back to the country town. Back to the same country town. And that was it, back to the same people I had left several years before.
Oh, really? Were there still some of the same?
Well, it was just, it was almost as if the 3 or 4 years in the military hadn't existed. I was suddenly back to where I was. And so I stuck at it for a couple of years, but I really wasn't super happy.
Did you actually study accountancy? Do you?
Yeah.
Have you completed that as well, or that was just something
I studied it because I had to.
Just filled the time.
Yeah.
That really was just a got to do something.
Yeah. And then, quite fortuitously, I saw an advert in the local Guernsey paper for people in Bermuda doing the same job as I was doing, basically accountancy and looking after trust accounts and clients. And that's what I'd been doing for a few years. So I applied for the job. I thought, well, I can go, and if it's no good, go back.
Yeah, nothing lost.
So I moved out to Bermuda in 1986. So I got the job, moved out, and that changed my life.
Well, I can only imagine. And Bermuda, again, for us, over in this side of the planet.
North Carolina. If you fly due east from Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, for 700 nautical miles, you'll fly right over the top of Bermuda.
Because all we know is the triangle where stuff goes missing.
Yeah.
That's all we've got.
Most people think of Caribbean. It's 1,000 miles north of the Caribbean.
Really?
Yep.
See, did not know that.
There you go.
And I have to assume that there were other jobs in other places. Did this just speak to your sense of adventure? To go somewhere reasonably bizarre? To go from one small island that gave you the shits to another small island?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few issues. The company that offered me the job was Bank of Bermuda, and they had their biggest branch outside of Bermuda was in Guernsey.
Huh.
And I knew several people that worked for them, so I had a chat with them, and they said, oh yeah, great place to work for. And so I knew if I went to Bermuda and didn't like it, I could probably transfer back to Guernsey with the bank.
So it was a fairly safe bet that you could just try something different.
And I knew a few people that had lived in Bermuda for a few years, and they all said the same thing: do it, go. You'll love it. Great weather, great lifestyle. Yeah, and I was single, unattached.
And
I thought,
20-something.
Yeah, 1986. I was 25 years old. It was the right time
Single,
to go.
Ready to mingle. How many people live in Bermuda? How big a place is that?
About the same size as Guernsey. In fact, it's almost identical. It's 25 square miles and 60,000 people.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
When you actually reflect on that.
Yeah, so I moved from one provincial town to another. But the big difference is they had sun and heat.
Glorious sun. And tell me about arriving in Bermuda. Did you have to go over to interview? Were there a couple of trips, or do you just pack your bags and go? How did that work?
All the interviewing was done in Guernsey because, of course, they had an office there. So the first time I saw Bermuda was the day I arrived on the aeroplane with my suitcase in my hand. And
obviously no feeling of horror when you arrived. You went, this is all right?
It's beautiful. Crystal blue waters, big lagoons. It was like landing in a TV show. It was amazing. Just this beautiful place.
Dirk Pitt on adventure, middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
Spoke to you. I could see you, the tan, the eyes, the staring into the sun. Did you have to find your own accommodation? Did they have something there for you?
No.
How did it work? Do you just get off the plane and figure it out? Or
Bank sorted it all out. I arrived and they had an apartment waiting for me.
It's a bloody good service.
Yeah.
Mate, those finance industries, how good's that?
Yeah.
Where did you live in Bermuda? Where was home? Were you looking out over the water? Was it as glorious as I might imagine it to be, or were you in the back blocks?
It wasn't quite that glorious.
No, when you're the whippersnapper, you got to start out the back.
You start further down. That's right.
Gotcha. Not straight to the penthouse.
No,
outhouse first.
No, I was on a place called South Shore. I was 2-minute walk from the beach, but you couldn't see it from
Rough. Yeah, when you can't see it, that's how you know you're not there yet. They're letting you know your place in the world. And go, you're on your way, Chief. 2 minutes, not too far if you put your head down. How did you go sort of fitting in there and finding how many people worked at the bank there? Was that a big exercise? Or?
Well, Bank of Bermuda was the largest employer outside of the government in Bermuda. So I'm trying to, I mean, this is a long time ago, but from memory, it was 1,500 people worked in the bank.
So proper.
On a small island with 6,000 people, that's a monster employer.
That is a monster employer. Like a skyscrapers, because again, you got to forgive my Australian ignorance, but I know very little.
Not skyscrapers, but the main head office of the bank was, I'm trying to think, six floors.
Views of the water?
Oh, yes.
Very good.
Yep, office that overlooked the water.
Because my redneck Queensland knowledge, most of it comes from The Simpsons. Big guy fan, if you're familiar with that specific scene. That's probably the extent of my knowledge. So I come from a place of great inexperience, which is why I'm always so fascinated to learn about these things. What did they get you onto first? Is it sort of a cadetship, or do you step into a role? How did that work?
Oh, straight into a role, looking after clients, doing accounting, investing, what I'd been doing for the last few years. But, I mean, there was no introduction. It was straight in because they hired me knowing I could do the job and
get to work.
They needed people there, so it was straight in day one.
And how was the place? Was it welcoming and receptive? Was it a...
Oh, it was great. You know, as an expat, with very little in the way of responsibility and a fairly large disposable income, and in your mid-20s, you know, it was great. I was out every night. I was on the beach every weekend. And I discovered that we could fly from Bermuda to New York, Atlanta, Chicago, Toronto. Anything on the East Coast or near the East Coast of the US had direct flights with Bermuda.
Wow.
So, you know, I was in the US a lot. That's when I became a huge baseball fan. Yeah, so I was in New York watching the Yankees whenever I could. And I'm still a Yankee fan, you know, years later. It was a fantastic time.
That sounds pretty extraordinary.
You know, most of the expats there were single because they deliberately hired singles. So
well, that's what they want. They want a couple of animals that'll work hard and enjoy it
and didn't need to go home at 5 o'clock to feed the kids.
Absolutely.
So we had a fun expat life there. And yeah, it was party.
It sounds bloody wild. How long's the flight time? How many hours to get across?
From where to where?
From
London?
Who's going away? It's cold. From Bermuda to the States.
Bermuda to New York would have been roughly 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
Bermuda to Boston, 2.5. Bermuda, Atlanta, 2 hours. Chicago, 3 hours. Toronto, 2.5.
Bloody great.
It was easy.
Mate, that's Brisbane to Melbourne. I mean, that's, you don't even think twice about it.
The longest flight was London, which would have been 7 hours. But even then, that's not too bad.
Well, that's it. It's not terrible. That's irritating.
You see a couple of movies, have a bite to eat, and you're there.
This doesn't sound too bad. So, you're probably... Were you perhaps less frustrated at the fact you couldn't fly your jets as you'd found yourself there, or did that still linger?
It still lingered, and fortunately, I used to do a lot of cycling, still do. I met a chap cycling And one day I was cycling along the railway trail on my mountain bike, and I started chatting to this chap that I'd seen him a couple of times, and we got to the point where we would wave at each other and say good morning, and we happened to be going the same direction at the same speed, and so we started chatting. And he had his private pilot's license, and he was telling me about going off to the States to do some flying. And I thought,
hang on a second,
I wouldn't mind a bit of that. So I looked at it, and I ended up going out to the States and doing some flying.
Now this is cool, because I'm wondering how these things come back, and that's what I was, I guess, trying to figure out, was when did that come back into your life? So that was during your time.
I spent nearly 20 years in Bermuda, on and off, and for that 20 years, I virtually every year I spent part of that year flying in the US. So, obviously you started with small stuff, and if I was on a trip somewhere in the US, I'd see what they had available, and sometimes it would be up in a glider, and I loved flying gliders because it's so pure and quiet, and you have to get what you're doing, or else
It's a pretty bad day.
yeah, it's a bad day. But I ended up doing most of my flying in a place called New Mexico. Santa Fe, New Mexico, and they had an Air National Guard base there. So it was split, part civilian, part military. And I became very friendly with a chap who owned a fleet of warbirds. And so for many, many years, I flew warbirds out of Santa Fe Air National Guard base.
See, now things start to make sense.
And now you're starting to understand why I flew all those military planes and why I still do.
Absolutely. And because with the abrupt end to your Air Force career, I was wondering how that made its way back into your life. And obviously it was something that you sought out, because that was an itch that needed to be scratched.
Yep.
And you found a way.
Yeah, and again, that was a really happy time for me, being in New Mexico flying just everything I could get my ass into. If something else arrived on the flight line, oh yeah, I'll fly that.
And it was just recreational flying? Like you weren't sort of going from place to place or carrying people, you just wanted to be in the air?
Not on a commercial basis, it was recreational flying, pure fun. So I'd go up in an aircraft knowing that I would be inverted, I'd be looping, I'd be rolling. I had the view at the time that unless I took a plane inverted, I hadn't flown.
There's that glint in your eye again. Man of mayhem.
Yes. Marcus Mayhem, as I was called more than once.
Do they give you a call sign, or do you self-allocate one when you are private?
I was given a call sign Magic.
Magic.
And that's because there is, in the US, a colouring pencil called a magic marker. It's one of those indelible pens, a permanent marker, as we would say here. And so Magic Marker became Magic Marcus. Just became Magic. So my flight helmet had Magic and my flight suit had Magic, and they still do. It's the name that I still go by when I fly.
That's not a terrible nickname, because...
It could be worse.
Yeah. My understanding being that you don't get to choose, it is chosen for you.
That's right.
Could have been a little bit more brutal. That's actually quite delightful.
Yeah.
They were kind to you there.
Yeah.
How long did it take to actually get your pilot's license? What's the duration to...
It depends on how many... It's not the time, it's the hours, how many flying hours you can put in. So there'd be some years where I'd only I'd only fly a few days that year, so I wouldn't even be current. And then I'd make sure the next year I'd take a couple of weeks off work and I'd go and I'd just fly non-stop all day, every day.
And get your hours. Is there a baseline for how many hours you need to do annually? Is that how it works?
Yeah, and I don't recall what it is in the US, but it was something like 30 hours a year. But don't quote me on that.
Oh, no, don't. And again, this is just all the time. This is so to sort of keep your ratings.
Yeah.
And they go, look, he's not a risk to himself and everybody else. He's done enough.
Yes.
This is quite an extraordinary time. I'm assuming, just broadly, that you... so you started 2 minutes from the beach. I'm assuming you made your way up the pecking order?
Yeah, I found my own apartment on a hill overlooking the ocean.
That's more like it.
Which was very pleasant.
I can only imagine. It has... I keep going Dirk Pitt, but there's probably a dash of Hugh Hefner in the back there as well. I'm sure it was a glorious place.
It was nice. It was nothing flamboyant. It was just a 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the bay.
Big garage?
No garage. No garage. But in Bermuda, everyone had a scooter, a moped. So I had a scooter to get to and from work. And you were allowed 1 car per household. So I had a car, but we didn't have a garage. It wasn't an issue. The car was nothing special. It was purely for weekends and when it rained.
So it wasn't a place for flashy vehicles?
No.
Really?
Not at all.
Interesting. Mm. Weird to be in a place of high finance where that's not a thing. I don't know. It seems weird to me, I guess.
Yeah. And again, I think it's what you grow up with. For Bermudians, they grew up knowing that you can only have 1 car per household, and you're limited by size and power to weight ratio that legally you can have. So there are no flashy cars. So a Toyota Corolla became a flashy car. So if you had a Toyota Corolla or something like that in Bermuda, you were doing very, very well. But there was not the same kind of car culture there that we'd be used to here. Which,
again, knowing you as I do, strikes me as odd.
Yeah.
That you were there on your scooter, tootling to work.
But don't forget, I spent a lot of time in the US flying, and I'd need a rental. So, when I flew into the US, I'd rent a Corvette or something like that to get around.
That's more like it. Because, again, I'm trying to put these pieces together and going, there's parts of this story that just aren't making sense based on the man that I know. And go, there's just not enough wild man here. But that makes a lot more. So you had your, big power, entertaining things going on in the States, which quenched that interest.
Absolutely.
See, now things are sort of starting to come together. You obviously spent a significant period of time there. Was all of your time with Bank of Bermuda, or did you end up doing something else, or were you with them the whole duration?
After 5 years, I left the Bank of Bermuda, moved to a different company. But then I decided that working for other people, the money's good, but you're never going to make significant money. You're only going to make significant money if you own what you're doing. I guess it's almost like a casino. You only make real money if you own the game. So after several years in Bermuda, I decided to set up my own operation. So hocked everything I had, went into serious debt with the bank to borrow money to set it up, and set up my own finance company.
And in the tradition of explaining like I'm five, what sort of finance company? Because I imagine Aussie Home Loans, but I'm probably wrong.
No, it was a trust company.
And so what does a trust company do for somebody that doesn't understand?
We set up trusts for wealthy families and individuals that needed to protect their assets or make allowance for what was going to happen to their estate when they died, or if it was a family that was multi-jurisdictional, how to not remove taxes, but how to limit taxes in the worst tax jurisdictions and move them to friendlier climates. It was a busy time. This was very early 90s, and there was a lot of wealth being made around the world, and people needed to put that wealth somewhere.
Because in terms of finance, you were certainly involved in what would have been a very interesting time, because I think Wall Street, what was that, 87, 86, 87, when we had
the crash.
Greed is Good, and then we had 89, that was quite untidy.
Yeah.
And so you would have rolled through those experiences. Please tell me that you had the cool mobile phone on the beach at some stage. Did you get to have a Gordon Gecko moment on the beach with a mobile phone?
No.
In the 80s? I'm disappointed.
I think I had the dubious honour of losing more mobile phones than anyone else.
Excellent.
Because they used to come out with me on a Friday night. And Saturday morning, I had no idea where they were.
Excellent. So there's a few of your phones littered around.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Braces? Did you? What's the dress code? Did you?
No braces.
You didn't get into the full Gordon Gecko?
No. Well, Bermuda.
I'm very interested.
Bermuda's very hot and humid. So the
linen?
No, the work attire was shorts, but tailored shorts. So we'd have tailored linen shorts, knee socks, proper shirt, tie, and a blazer. It looked very smart.
Does look very smart.
And it was the coolest way to survive the summers there, which were hot and humid.
I'm 7/10 of the way there.
Yep. But no Crocs.
I don't think that glorious footwear had been invented yet. That actually does, look, that makes sense. And I think that that's actually wonderful that they tailored to the climate. I must say, I've always scratched my head here in Brisbane. Why on earth people wear suits when you have 40-degree, 90% humidity days?
Yeah.
And as a man who feels the heat, I walk into town on those days and I go, you have got to be kidding me. We have not thought this through.
Wow.
I call this Queensland business casual. This T-shirt, shorts and Crocs look, perfect for all weather. Setting up that new business, that's a hell of a time. And you're obviously taking on, like, the sort of customer that you are speaking of here. It's not their first rodeo. They would have significant expectations of you, and again, you're not handling $2. That would be quite a task.
The problem was compounded by the fact that obviously because we were a financial institution, we had to be licensed, and we applied for the license just as the government changed, and the party that won the election came in for their very first ever term.
Oh.
Which meant that everything got delayed.
Yikes.
So, picture this. I have hocked everything that I have. I have taken out a huge loan with the bank. I have an office that I've had to equip, and I've got staff. We don't have a license because the government hasn't issued one yet, so we cannot do any business, so we cannot generate any income. I am hemorrhaging money every month. It got to the point where I worked out that I thought I had a survival of 2 months perhaps less, perhaps 1, 2 months maximum. And finally, the government said, your license has been approved. And the day that happened, I billed all of my clients for a year in advance for their fees, because a lot of clients from my previous company had come over with me. And, at that point, well, we weren't making money, but we weren't going to be closing the doors.
Bloody hell. So that was very close to the edge.
I was working 7 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day.
With nothing coming in.
With nothing coming in.
Makes me feel unwell.
Yeah, it made me feel unwell. It wasn't the best time, but yeah, what do? You owe the bank everything you have and then some. So you keep going on the basis that sooner or later the government's got to give me my license.
That's really quite terrifying too, because it's totally outside of your control. There's nothing you can do to encourage that. That's just
nothing whatsoever.
Tough bickies.
Yeah.
Wow. What a wonderful introduction to that operation. Jeez.
Yeah.
Oh, Marcus. And how many people did you have working for you? Do you out of the gates?
4.
4.
Yeah, just 4. It was just a small trust company. We weren't trying to be the biggest.
Just wanted to do it yourself.
Yeah, that's it.
And go, bugger it, why not?
Unfortunately, once the license came in, then things picked up really quickly. We started getting business from other trust companies where clients were fed up with poor service and knew that I'd set up my own shop, and so business just started coming to us, and I'd made sure that all of the law firms which sent all the business to Bermuda, I kept on a very good basis with. So when they had new business to come out, like, well, are we going to send it to the bank? I tell you what, Marcus has always been very good to our clients. Well, let's send it out to Marcus's new shop. And so we had new business coming in, pretty much every month, which was fantastic. And it wasn't long before I could square the bank off. So I knew I wasn't going to lose what we had. We weren't making money, but I wasn't going to lose anything. And when I was able to square off the bank loan, that was a huge relief.
I could only imagine just that moment of just the weight off your shoulders.
Yeah.
Bloody hell. Man of mayhem, aren't you? And how far did you take that company?
Stuck with it until I sold it in 2000 and something. Built it up, and it was time to leave Bermuda. It was time to move on. I wanted to move back to Europe, so I sold the company and retired. But I've missed out an important story. Whilst I was flying in Santa Fe, I was made aware of an opportunity to go to Russia, to go to Moscow and fly with the Russian Air Force a MiG-29. How's that, you say?
Yes. How is that, I say?
It's because the Russian economy was bankrupt. They needed money. They were opening up to the West, and they had this great product, the MiG-29, and they knew if they could sell it to the West, they could get hard dollars. So a lot of Western pilots were invited to go across and fly the MiG. And I was invited to spend a week over at Zhukovsky, which is the Russian Flight Research Center, which is where they landed the Russian space shuttle. It's got a 5-kilometer runway. Even I can land on 5 kilometers. So I went out to Russia for a week with another pilot and spent a week training and flying with the Russian Air Force, which culminated in me flying the MiG-29. Mach 2, 60,000 feet.
So you finally got your jet.
Well, I'd flown a lot of jets, in the time preceding that and since. But I finally got to fly one which was state-of-the-art, cutting edge,
jet.
bad boy, as bad as you want right now. Yeah.
That was the moment.
That was the moment. So one of my few claims to fame is that I flew the MiG-29, one of the early Western pilots to fly it. And I flew it on the basis that I'd write about it. And so I wrote a small book called Inside the MiG-29.
You're kidding.
No, it sold, I think, about 23 copies.
Oh, bloody hell, I'm going to have to find it and make it 24. Wow.
Yeah.
Are you on, is that still published? Is that...
Oh, God, no. I think it went through one run, and I might have a copy at home somewhere that I'll dig out for you.
We've got to dig that out. That's unbelievable. Yeah. What? Bloody... Yeah, I think Clive Kessel was writing about you, mate. This is ridiculous. What was that like, actually, going into Russia at that time, with it being as a Western...
It was like going into a Western town as a cowboy gunfighter, you know.
Hit the gates open and then they go.
And I have a funny story. We went to have a meal in the crew room at the Flight Research Centre. Now, the other pilot and I are wearing our Western flight suits. We'd been told to wear Russian flight suits, but I declined. And I was told that, you should wear a Russian flight suit because if you have to eject, your Western flight suit will not help you survive in a Russian climate for more than a few hours. This was February in Moscow. They have, I believe, 30 different words for mud, and I heard every single one of them. It's a brutal place in the winter. So my rationale was, you know what? I speak no Russian. I'm clearly a Westerner. If I have to eject from a MiG-29, what do you think my chances of surviving are anyway? And he said, good point. Wear what you want. So we walked into the crew room, which is basically a great big cafeteria, wearing our Western flight suits. And everything went quiet. And it was. We were the gunfighters. We'd kicked open the swing doors, and it had closed, and the piano had stopped, and everyone turned around. And we looked at each other and smiled and kind of walked in. And then you could see a couple of people murmuring to each other, the Western MiG pilots. And then normal service resumed. But it was ever so funny walking in and just the entire world stopping.
And especially when you've got magic written across your bloody suit as well.
That's
they go, settle down, mate.
And I still have that flight suit that I wore in Russia.
Wow.
It was specially altered because their G suits, they wear on the inside of their flight suit, not on the outside. For Western suits, we wear them on the outside. But theirs actually makes more sense. So my flight suit had been altered to take a G suit on the inside.
Brings me back to the in Russia, suit wears you. So, wow. Did you end up forming any even short friendships with anybody there? Was there vodka? Was there shared laughs? Or was it very much segmented?
No, there were plenty of laughs and vodka involved, but we were heavily policed. We were met at the airport by an official dignitary, and I remember passport control, handing my passport to the control man, and him asking me some questions that I didn't really understand. And this character stepped out from the side with a black trench coat, wearing a black trench coat, and he was there to meet me, and I didn't realise it. And he said something to the customs officer, and the customs officer went kind of white as a sheet, stamped the passports and gave them back without a word. So clearly he was put under manners.
Yeah, that's he's with us.
Yeah. But everywhere we went, we had a chaperone with us. Partly because we spoke none of the language. So, but we weren't allowed to go anywhere. Didn't mean we didn't. One night we'd been dropped off. We'd been flying all day. We'd been dropped off at the hotel. And I said to the chap with me, I've heard about this club.
This is more like it.
Called Night Flight. It was quite notorious. I said, do you fancy going? And he said, yeah. So I said, right. And I got at the hotel lobby. I said, can you organise a car to take us to Night Flight? And the concierge looked at me and said, you're going to Night Flight? No, it was notorious for being full of two things: Russian mafia and prostitutes.
Recipe for a good time?
Yeah. So I said, yeah, I know where we're going. And he's looking around because he knows we're supposed to have a chaperone. He said, okay, so I'll sort you out a car. So he sorted us out a car. We went to Night Flight. Well, it wasn't quite what we had hoped. Yes, it was full of working ladies and mafia. But just to get a beer was like $50, and on our expenses, that wasn't going to last too long. So we finally decided that we'd head back to the hotel. And then the problem arrived. We don't really know where we are. And the blocks in Russia are enormous. It's not like Wynnum, where a block is 50 metres long. The block could be 5 kilometres. And so we've started to walk because we can't get a taxi. And we're running out of ideas pretty fast. And as I said earlier, this is February.
Bit fresh.
So it's cold. And we're walking along, and I'm trying to think of what to do. And a truck comes up the road. I thought, right. And I stepped into the road in front of the truck and put my hands up, and the truck slammed on its brakes. And I walked around to the driver's cab, and he unwound his window. And I held up the hotel room key, which had the name of the hotel and the address. And I pulled out a $20 bill, and I put the key in one hand against the window and the $20 bill in the other hand against the window. And he just said, "Da, get in." So we climbed up into the truck, and he dropped us at the front door of the hotel. Needless to say, the following day, because word got around very quickly.
Of course it did.
We were in deep doo-doo.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, the Russian officials were not at all happy.
How does that go? How does it dressing down from...
We were told under no certain terms that it would not happen again, and so we were not left to our own devices again.
I could imagine.
Basically, they stayed with us at the hotel until we went to bed to our rooms.
Because, it's a place where I understand that people can be reasonably unforgiving in their...
Yes, yes.
Is that a polite way to say that you do the fuck what you're told? Or?
And not known for their sense of humour.
No, not high on the list of... Yeah, your banter probably... Your charm probably didn't work as well as it used to.
Yeah.
And you're like, I can smooth it. Whoa. Nope, I can't. All right, backpedal. Sorry.
So I'm sure there are still stories going around Moscow about these two crazy Western pilots that got a lift in a truck back to the hotel one night.
After they've been at the Mafia nightclub.
Yeah,
What?
I'm here to tell you that story is true.
Oh, mate. See, I knew I'd enjoy this conversation. I just had a feeling that man of mayhem. So you're still in Bermuda at this time. So when you got to fly your jet, build the business, all these wonderful things, there's a part of this story that is still missing for me. Race cars. Because like most things, you seem to like things that have a dash of acceleration, and you've done a bit of it.
Yeah, well, during my time in Bermuda, I did some kart racing, gearbox karts, go-karts, that kind of thing. Nothing serious. And when I left Bermuda and returned to Guernsey, I knew I didn't want to work again. Fortunately, I knew I didn't really need to, and I'd satiated one of my passions, and that was flying. But I hadn't satiated the other passion, which was cars and motor racing. And so I knew I wanted to get involved in motor racing. So I went to the UK, got signed on to do a novice race series with Toyota, driving MR2s. Went and took my race driver's test, passed that, so then I had a racing license. And so every month or every other week, I'd go from Guernsey to UK to race somewhere in the UK in an MR2.
And of all the platforms to race in, that one sounds terrible. Were the MR2s all right with the...
horrible. Awful.
They were never renowned as a car for their grip. They look great. Like, very pretty car. I've got a lot of love for the MR2. But as something to drive on the edge...
Well, that's exactly where they became unwieldy. They were a fine race car until you got to the edge. And when you got to the edge...
See you later.
They gave you very little warning. They just let go. So, I mean, I didn't even finish my first season racing. The reason I picked it was because they were looking for drivers. It was Toyota, so I knew reliability was going to be good. And it was cheap.
Ticks every box.
Yeah.
Like, you've nailed it. I mean, that's as good as racing gets.
Yeah. But I wasn't happy. I never enjoyed it. And I never had any decent results, even though I knew my driving was not bad. And one day, and this is how life goes, well, for some people anyway, one day I was signing on at Silverstone for an MR2 race series. And the clerk of the course, who I knew vaguely, said, "Marcus, how are you doing?" I said, "Oh, okay." He said, "You don't look particularly happy." I said, "Oh, I'm not enjoying MR2s." He said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "I'd really like to race historics. Like Lotus Cortinas, BMWs, anything.
Anything except
anything
mid-engine
except an
MR2.
Yeah." He said, "Oh, okay." He said, "Well, if I hear of anything." And a couple of weeks later, I got a phone call. And it was a guy who owned a Lotus Cortina race car. And he said, "There's a big historic race event coming up at Silverstone. The clerk of the course said, 'You're looking for a drive.'" He said, "I'm looking for a driver." How fortuitous was that? So I raced his Lotus Cortina in this great big historic event at Silverstone. Didn't do too well. They put the wrong diff in it. So I could only ever pull third gear, even all the way down Hanger Straight. But it got me noticed. And I did a decent job.
Well, you didn't. If you didn't bin it and you finished and you drove it hard but with respect, and after getting blitzed by an MR2, you would have felt like a man unleashed. You would have felt like you're in the Russian MiG going, "Whoa, look at this power and control."
It was great. I enjoyed it. And the owner of the Lotus was very well connected in historic race car circles. And a week or two after I'd driven his car, he said, "BMW, after a driver. They're a driver short for a race in Dijon in France in historic touring cars. Would you like me to give your name to the boss of the team? I said, oh, yes, please.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Yeah. So suddenly I'm racing a BMW TI 1800 four-door 1960s at Dijon. I'd never been to Dijon before, but of course I didn't tell them that.
No, don't let them know.
And we did well. We finished third. It's a two-driver race. So BMW said, look, we've got one race to finish the season, and that was at Spa, big one. Do you want to race there as well? I said, oh, yes, please.
If you twist my arm, I'll make time.
And again, I'd never been to Spa at that point. I'd only ever raced in the UK.
So you just keep saying yes and
So
smiling and making up as you go along.
Very early on in my career, I made the decision never to turn down a step up, ever.
Always say yes, the door doesn't open twice.
That's it. So I went to Dijon, to Spa for the last race of the season and finished second. And in the off-season, I got invited to BMW and they offered me a contract. And that's how I became entrenched in motor racing.
Fucking hell, mate. That's a pretty good story. So you've just rumbled up. You've accidentally become a BMW factory works dealer. You arsey bastard. Is that what they would say?
Yeah.
Like that is just...
I spent the next 9 years racing for BMW. With others as well.
Of course, but
they were my mainstay bread and butter.
That's just mildly ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think that the pilot training helped to sharpen the skills? Do you think that there's a crossover?
Without doubt. I think flying made me a better driver and driving made me a better pilot.
Because I was trying to figure it out, because if you didn't grow up racing, you weren't a kid that was karting, and you have catapulted, because these are not easy cars to drive, these are not easy circuits to just waltz in.
I mean, I would say that possibly the biggest factor was my engineering study at Halton. It gave me the appreciation and mechanical sympathy of what was going on. So I actually understood what every part of the car was trying to do, and I had a sympathetic feel for it. Whereas a lot of drivers, might have been quicker than me over one lap, but not over a race, because they didn't understand the limitations of what every component of the car had.
And where to keep it at what time and how far to push and when, rather than just full noise all the time until something explodes.
Yeah.
Wow. Because there was a big disconnect in the stories there, going, how do you go from tootling some go-karts to that? And it's obviously
better to be lucky than good.
Yeah. Oh, mate. But see, that's lucky and good, because, again, you can be lucky once, but if you're doing it again, that's no longer luck.
Yeah.
That's bloody wild.
Yeah, it was great. So I had started my third career.
As a...
I had the Air Force, and then I had finance, and then motor racing.
You're out of control, mate. So talk to me about coming in with BMW. What time period here? When did that happen?
Oh, that was 2000 and... I think 2010, I think.
Thereabouts that you jumped in.
2010, 2012, it's in that period.
And how did that work? I mean, how does this work when you start driving for BMW? Like, what goes on? How?
Well, it wasn't BMW Munich, it was BMW UK, so it was their kind of UK historic racing arm. So they were based in Birmingham, in the UK. So I spend a lot of time going up to the factory, the workshop in Birmingham, to, have seats fitted, corner weights fitted, and spend a lot of time with the race engineers working on everything. And then we do, a lot of testing. And then the season, it was the European Historic Touring Car Championship. So it was great. It was France, Italy, Spain, Belgium, Germany, UK, Holland. It was all over the place.
This is rock and roll, this stuff.
Oh, yeah, it was.
This is proper
yeah,
rock and roll.
yeah. I'd gone from being in the rear of the MR2 grid to suddenly being one of the, fancied BMW drivers in a race. And sometimes I still don't know how that happened.
Oh, we can put two and two together for you if it's not obvious. You're a dashing man that knows the right thing to say and then works your ass off when you're given the chance. That is really quite extraordinary. And BMW, I have quite a soft spot for and I think that their motorsport division is something that they've always done very well, and it's always sad when they've had a bit of a breather between exercises. But that's a big one. Which cars were you running in historics? Were there a number of different?
No, it was always the same.
Always
the same car, because the regulations were for pre-1966 touring cars. So for that, it was always the TI 1800, which was called the Teaser, TISA.
And that car, was it allowed, with your engineering knowledge, were things allowed to be pushed within the rules, or did it all have to be kept quite accurate?
Well, certain things had to be kept accurate. The weight. The homologation weight was 1,000 kilos, so exactly a ton. The Alfa Romeos were 750. The Lotus Cortinas were 670. So straight away, we had a big weight penalty to try and haul around the circuit chasing those guys. But BMW did not stop developing the motor. Now, the motor, when it came out in 1966, was 100 and, quoting off the top of my head here, but about 110 brake horsepower.
Which for the time
is pretty good.
Throwing down pretty hard.
In race form, we were racing it with 235. Still the same engine.
Yeah, but the
still the same mechanical
M division
layout.
get in there with the secret sauce.
Exactly.
And they do what they do.
Yep.
Wow, that's a fair bit of extra spice.
Oh, yes. She'd spin up the rears in
everything.
First 3 gears.
I have no doubt. Yeah. That's a shit ton of power for a car that weight.
And you remember, you're on 6-inch wide tyres.
Oh, yeah.
You have to run on period correct.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you'd just be number 11s all over the place.
Yeah.
Trying to actually hold it back would probably be...
You learn the art of four-wheel drift.
Oh, bloody bet you do. Because that is a monstrous amount of power. Was that bored and stroked and the whole bit, or was that...
No, you couldn't bore them and stroke them because
you can't do that.
No, it would be in contravention of the homologation.
I don't know if you're allowed to say secrets, but how the fuckity fuck do you find another 100 horsepower?
Most of it is in the gas flowing of the heads and the extraction.
100 horsepower?
Yeah. Yep. Now the carburetors are changed, so we were running
to jet engines. Like I'm still trying to. I'm no engineer.
We'd have straight through throttle body carburetors, so big slide carbs were allowed. So a slide carb bangs up the horsepower immediately. Then you gas flow and port the head, bangs up the power again. Exhaust system completely modified. More. Plus, we'd run at 107 RON race fuel, whereas the fuel they had back in the day was, 98 to 100. So all those, and they could reshape the piston heads. Oh, sorry, BMW, I don't think I was supposed to say that. We can edit that out later.
There's no editing here, mate. Yeah, okay. But look, this is what I was trying to imagine. Is I'm sort of imagining that there are, because look, this is part of racing.
Ball and stroke have to stay the same.
But
within those confines.
Correct. And this is always the trick. And this is part of being a good crew chief, good engineer, is you read the rules and you go, it says that, but it doesn't say that.
Yeah.
And if it is still within the rules, well, mate, let her rip. Yeah. And that's where all the great motor racing stories come from, is people spot the gap and they go, let's go.
Absolutely.
Because that's extraordinary. I mean, that really is amazing. And they still had the reliability in there as well? Or did that take a toll as you increase the severity by 2?
That certainly had an impact.
I could only imagine. You'd be popping things out the side all the time.
Well, the biggest problem was the usable rev range. So we'd had the red line moved up. So I think the original red line was at around, and again, I'm not 100% sure. I think the original red line on those cars was around 6 to 6.5, and we were revving them to 7.5. So she was. She'd take more revs, but if you took it above 7.5, it would go pop. So you could take it to 7.5.
Not 7.6.
But not 7.6. Yes. Yes. That's exactly right.
And these are the things that I'm sure we both enjoy about motorsport, is I love seeing how far things can be taken, and certainly that engineering side of motor racing I think is extraordinary. And the minds that work to that. And I'm sure that your teams would have really enjoyed someone who could sit in the driver's seat, describe to your team what you are feeling, but then also have useful information from an engineering perspective.
I always had a great rapport with my engineers, always got on really, really well with them. I think because you're right, they appreciated the fact that I had studied engineering, and so I understood what was going on. Well, it's more than most drivers,
broadly speaking.
Yeah,
absolutely. This is a wild story. As you went through these, were there certain tracks that you really enjoyed? Were there places that were just terrible? How was the journey of being a historic driver?
I never enjoyed Monza. Never had any luck there, just in the early days.
Difficult circuit.
Yeah, and it didn't suit the BMW.
The big straights would cause problems?
Big straights, we'd get
decimated.
monstered by the Cortinas and the Alphas.
Well, the Alphas
unless
have
it was raining.
Material falling out of them as well, so they're losing weight all the time. Unless it was raining, and then you could...
Yeah, because the Alphas and Cortinas both had solid axle rear suspension. BMW, fully independent. So in the wet, we were lightning compared to them. We were light years ahead. Dijon was probably my favourite circuit. I think in all the years, all the races I did there, I never came outside of a podium. Podiumed every single time.
What do you attribute that to?
I don't know. I loved the area. It's a beautiful part of France. So I really enjoyed being there. I loved how the circuit flowed. So for me, it was always a happy time there. There are some circuits, and I'm thinking especially of the UK, you get there, it's cold, it's wet.
It's hard work.
The track conditions aren't great, and you think, oh gosh, why am I here? Excuse me. But Dijon was never like that.
And again, I see you smile as you remember. And I've got a water there for you as well, mate. But I see the smile as you think of the place, and I can see that it's obviously one of those that even as you would have been thinking about it, preparing for it, and you go, this is just my place.
Yeah.
And then it continued to reward you for that.
Spa was somewhat similar, not as successful, and Le Mans was the same.
Talk to me about Le Mans. I mean, that's a special place.
Yeah, you know, if you're into motorsport and it's not F1, then Le Mans is always going to be a special. It's going to be the holy grail. Certainly if you're interested in endurance racing, which for me I was. Ever so sorry about that, folks. So any chance I got to race at Le Mans was great.
Well, you drop everything.
Yeah, I never turned down a race there, and I've raced in some atrocious conditions there, but just loved it. And towards the end of my racing time, I had the chance to have a car built for me, BMW, for the Le Mans Classic 24 hours.
What? You sly dog. How did you talk your way into that? Who did you run into? Who did you meet bicycling that you spoke to?
It was built by a company in Aachen called Engels Rennsport, and they were BMW 2002 specialist. And Norbert Engels, the proprietor, and he and I were good friends. And he said, the Le Mans Classic, do you want to run in it? I said, yeah, but I'm not sure what car. And he said, back in 1972, a 2002 won the touring car category, which means they're eligible to run in the Classic. I said, yeah, but a 2002. He said, I could build you a special one. So he built a special 2002 for me, and we ran it in the Le Mans Classic in 2012, and we won. It was atrocious weather, and that's the only reason we won.
Well, that's your special place.
From
all the time racing in atrocious weather and having a good time.
And I hate to blow my own trumpet, but
give it a rip.
I was very good in the wet. From all those years racing in the UK.
Of course. You had honed those skills.
Yeah. So the little BMW 2002, which had the 2-litre motor in it, and it rained pretty much the whole of the Le Mans 24-hour Classic weekend, and it was monsoon, and we just drove it flat out. And I can remember being on the back of the Mulsanne Straight at some ludicrous time in the morning, like 2 in the morning, pitch black, pouring with rain, and I was on the back of a Porsche 935. Now, in the wet, he would have walked away from me. But it was dark and it was raining, and I was on his boot lid, and we were flat out. And I thought, hang on, Marcus. If he goes in, you're going in with him without a shadow of a doubt. Let's just back it off a few metres. So I just lifted the throttle just a little bit to drop back 4 or 5 metres so I could have a chance to react to brake lights. And as soon as I did that, he signalled and pulled over. He'd been waiting for me to drop off so that he could pull and slow down and let me through. So this 935 twin turbo let this little BMW 2002 through. But we had a great race. And we won. And so forever I will have Le Mans Winners 24-hour cup on my mantelpiece.
And for those of us who love this whole mad world, I'm unsure how you top that. Because, I mean, that is...
I never did.
That's the grail.
I never did. That is my most prized racing possession, my Le Mans Winners Cup.
Because that is literally... And for people who... Because, again, Netflix doesn't have a show about it, so you might not know it as well. But for people who don't understand Le Mans. Could you share for you what makes Le Mans so special?
To drive a car flat out for 24 hours without it braking, without you making an error, is just unfeasibly difficult. And any 24-hour race is difficult. Any 24-hour race. And I've done, I think I've done 11 24-hour races. But the two most difficult, without doubt, are Le Mans and Nürburgring. Nürburgring, because of its length of the circuit and the number of cars on the circuit, and Le Mans, because of the fast straights and the speeds that you're pulling down there. My last race at Le Mans was with Ferrari in a 458, and we were clocked through the speed trap on the Mulsanne at 315 kilometres an hour. In old money, that's 200 miles an hour, just shy of 200, like 198 something like that. And that's quick in anybody's language. That's why it's a special place.
And that's every lap for 24 hours. And I think this is the thing that people who are outside of the automotive fraternity don't necessarily understand. That is every lap.
Yeah.
That is full noise.
Plus, as a teenager, I saw the film Le Mans, Steve McQueen, and I thought to myself, I've got to do that.
That's a bit of me.
One day I have got to do that. Now, I never did get to race a Porsche 917, but I raced a Porsche at Le Mans 1 year and won. You know, so...
Not the worst.
No.
And it is... I have visited that circuit on Le Mans weekend, and it is hard to describe the excitement, the overwhelming feeling of being at that place where there is so much history, so much folklore, so many, like it's our modern day gladiators.
So much
in
history.
Our little world. It is an extraordinary place.
I mean, to put it in a context that your listeners will appreciate, take Bathurst and then multiply it by a factor of 5 or 6, and you're getting close to what Le Mans is.
Can't argue with you on that. Because it is special.
And I've raced at Bathurst and I enjoyed it. You know, it was great, don't get me wrong.
Oh, no.
But Le Mans is something special.
It's on another level. And I must say, Nürburgring, very much the same. Like, Grünhall, like, it really is. It is a brutal, and excuse my terrible butchering of, language. It is a brutal place. And interestingly, that was where our paths crossed over, if my recollection is accurate, was you obviously weren't restricted to just the good folks at BMW. You were in a little blue ranky-dink from another British manufacturer.
That's right, yeah. I was in the V12 Aston Martin Vantage. And I'd been racing for Aston Martin for about a season. And again, you know, it's like, how does that happen?
Yeah, I was going to say James Bond. Were you just having a martini at the bar and you went, do you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to race for the Great British Mark.
Well, it was a friend of mine, a racing friend, said, you need to get yourself a manager. And I said, I don't need a manager.
Go, turn it up, I'll just go racing.
I just go racing. You know, only full pros need a manager, you know.
Yeah, Steve McQueen needs a manager, but
yeah,
mate, I'm just shenanigans.
And he said, no, really, you need a manager to get you the drives that you want. And I thought,
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Because it opens more doors and not just your serendipity.
Yeah. So I took on a management team based in the UK, and it was 2 guys running this management team. And one of the guys, whose name is Darren Turner, Aston Martin works driver.
Get out of town.
No, and
again, I wonder how these things intersect.
Yeah, like I say,
bloody hell.
better to be lucky than good. And
You're pretty good at falling forward here, Chief.
Well, yeah, I think if you take the view in life, always be looking to go forward, don't keep looking back, then Correct. I think good things happen.
Wow.
So
of all the people to select.
And I'd only been signed with them for about a month, and they said, look, Darren's just found out they need a driver in Nürburgring next week. I said, oh, let me check my diary. Yeah, oh, it appears I'm free.
Whatever I had on is now cancelled.
Yeah. So I got my butt down to Nürburgring, and I drove the V8 Vantage that they had there in a race and did okay. And drove a couple of races, and then they put me in the big V12. And then one day, I was called into the office, and they said, "Look, we want you to drive the season next year, not just a couple of races for us." And I said, "Well, I am committed to BMW, but for the most part, the races did not clash." So I knew I could. It was a bit of wiggle room, I could maybe drop one race from Aston, one race from BMW, and everyone would be happy, kind of thing. And they said, and we've got this young Australian, which we want you to take him under your wing. We want you to be the mentor for this young kid. We think he's good. We think he's got the capability, but he wants to be an endurance driver, and he needs to learn from a pro. So will you do it? And I said, sure, okay. And I knew it was quite an honour, but I also knew I didn't have much of an option. If I said no, then
somebody else gets it.
Yeah, someone else would be driving in my place. And that young pro turned out to be Liam Talbot, good Queensland boy who is, he's one of my neighbours. We live 10 minutes from each other now.
And to accidentally fast forward this story, as we were setting up this morning, I made comment of his little boogie in an Aston Martin over the weekend, where he once again showed that he's not too bad with the steering wheel.
No, he's a good peddler.
Oh, bloody hell. This is a great story, Marcus. As I said, this is just for my own selfish interest. This is just because I think this is great. And again, if anybody else enjoys it, that's a bloody bonus. But, mate, this is magical. So you got called in. And who called you in at Aston? Who calls? Who reaches out for Marcus? Or does that come via your management team? Back when that happened.
To put me in with Liam, that was Wolfgang Schubauer, who was the boss of Aston Martin Nürburgring. It was his call, but his call came to me via Susie Engelhardt, who was kind of the PR manager.
And one of the most beautiful human beings.
She is, and I think that Wolfgang knew that it would be more likely to be received well if it came from Susie rather than him. So
she has the delicate touch.
Yeah. And to be honest, I was quite happy with it.
Oh, stoked.
And once I met Liam, we clicked instantly. Never would have believed that 10 years later we'd be best mate. He was best man at my wedding, and we'd be living 10 minutes from each other.
You couldn't predict that if you tried.
No.
Let's be honest. Because did you have any preconceived notions of a fella coming from Australia? Because I'm sure you would have looked him up and gone, okay, we've got some information.
No, I knew nothing.
I'll just do my job, stay in my lane, and take care of what I was told to do.
Yep. No, I didn't look him up. I mean, Aston Martin gave me a brief resume about Liam, so I knew he was capable and had the talent. He just needed to kind of be schooled in the way of endurance racing, and it is different. You know, it's
So
a different
different.
mindset.
So different. And so different to the things that he was doing here with the Radical and the different
that's it,
vehicles that he
the races here are
campaigned.
20 minutes long. Well, 20 minutes, that's a quarter of a stint for us.
And I think that's the thing, he's coming from, again, Queensland, Australian racing to Europe, VLN, endurance.
Yeah.
It's an alternate universe.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, as somebody that came in on that boat with that man, where they're going, whoa. Not dissimilar to, I guess, some of your earlier feelings, going, how did we end up here? And we're looking at each other and going, how did we end up here?
Life's a funny thing, I still look back on some of the things that happened and I think, how?
All the time, mate. All the time. How? And it is. It's really quite extraordinary because we obviously we were just happy to be there, I'll be honest with you. But then meeting yourself and meeting the rest of the team and meeting the beautiful people from Aston Martin and the warmth with which we were received and the camaraderie and the kindness. And then, obviously, when the work comes, everyone just buckles up and gets it done. Like, certainly for me, and again, boy from Brisbane, you know what it's here. Like, this is a big country town, mate. And for us to then walk into this world of yours that you were there to help to show us, mate, there were, little Australian heads exploding.
Hey, you've got to remember, I'm just a guy from Guernsey. It's half the size of Bribey, remember?
I remember. But you've been doing this for a bit longer at a few more places, which is why you were given the job.
Yeah.
And it was that race. That was a good race, and I actually don't recall because I'm trying to, and hopefully I don't get my years and my races mixed up. But in the blue Aston, the
V12,
the one that you have the model of over there, was that 2014?
Trying
to get my years right.
2014. Yes, we finished second.
Yeah, so it was at the pointy end as well.
Yeah.
In that vehicle, again, Nürburgring for me was one of the places, that was one of my holy grails, to see that place. And to see it for the first time with an Aston Martin team, and my buddy part of that team.
Special.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're going to see it for the first time, see it properly.
Oh, and Aston even, they had some of the cars there as well, and they're like, oh, yeah, you can take one of them. And I got to drive one of the V12s and cruise, and they're going, it's pretty good. And then the mayhem of Nürburgring 24-hour. One of my most vivid experiences was I walked deep into the forest, so towards Carousel, but from the inside. And
which carousel? The big one?
The big one.
Yeah.
The shanty towns of revelers that built, like, they built multi-level structures.
And they put some housing estates to shame.
The shenanigans of the spectators is extraordinary.
They have full bars, they have showers, and this is all in temporary stuff that they knock up for the weekend. German engineers.
They, honestly, I saw one that was 3 levels, and then they had a winch so that they could winch the crates of beer up to the top floor. But they had satellite dishes, like, you name it. They had fridges, power. Yeah. I've never seen it, because again, here in Australia, they wouldn't let you do that. But deep in the forest at Nürburgring for N24 weekend, I mean, that's an experience, because there's a couple of 100,000 people there, if I recall correctly.
Closer to 300,000.
300,000 people.
Well, you've got to remember that the circuit itself is, I forget, it's 22 kilometres, I think.
Bloody long.
Yeah. So you've got a lot of spots for spectators all the way around. But I mean, it was It was probably the circuit I liked the least when I first started racing there, simply because it was just so long, trying to get comfortable with every section, every corner. But the best advice I ever had was from my teammate at BMW, Jackie Oliver, the ex-F1 driver, Le Mans winner, and he said, don't try and learn it all. Only learn the slow corners and work everything back from there. He said, if you arrive at a quick corner going too slow, you just put your foot down. If you arrive at a slow corner going too quick, it's game over at Nürburgring. And that was the best advice I ever had about racing at Nürburgring. So I learned all of the slow corners and then filled out my internal map in my head from there.
That is extraordinary advice.
Yeah.
So I must say I've done a few laps on virtual versions, and it is the great challenge, is there is so much to recall, and as you get tired and the interior gets hot and mind wanders.
I had a chap chatting to me once, and he said, I've driven a lot of laps on Nürburgring in my simulator. I said, all right. He said, what's your best lap time around there? I said, I don't know, on a full GP and Nordschleife, it's, around 9 minutes or 8:40, something like that. It's in that. I don't recall. And he said, I've been faster around the circuit than that. I said, great. I said, does the simulator simulate a crash and injure you? He said, well, obviously not. I said, obviously not. And he didn't say anything more about how fast he was in the simulator after that.
They are not the same. And they never can be.
No.
If you know anything about cars, and honestly, it's probably a reasonable segue because I'm also conscious of your time and I think it's just started raining. We met again with a different Mark. How on earth did that happen? How were you friends with the wonderful team out of Switzerland, or how on earth? How do these bizarre things happen, Marcus?
It was down to my manager, and I was in Guernsey, and he phoned me up, and he said, Marcus, there is a seat going at Kessel Ferrari in GT3. They've seen your resume. They like you. They'd like you to test if you want to drive. Well, I said, let me think about this. Would I like to drive for Ferrari? Toughie. Yeah, okay. And so they said, so my manager said, right, you're going to Monza. I said, when? He said, tomorrow. Oh, right, okay. So following day, I flew down to Monza.
One of your least favourite tracks.
My least favourite track. But the last time I'd raced at Monza previous to my test was in an historic touring car, which have no aero, rubbish tyres, and the brakes aren't particularly good. So you manhandle it around the whole circuit. So they put me in a 458 Ferrari, and they said, right, get used to the car. We don't need to break any records. Let's, get used to it. We've got all day. Right here. So I went out, and I did a few laps, came in, they checked the tyre pressure. I said, how's the lap time? And he said, lap time is fine. Honestly, don't worry about it. Okay. So I went back out for another session. And I really pushed it on the second session. And so I got a radio call, come in. So I came in. I said, everything okay? They said, yeah, we're done for the day. I said, what do you mean we're done for the day?
Oh, shit. What have I done?
Yeah, well, that's it. What have I done? Have I buzzed the car? Have I broken something? I said, what's the problem? He said, there's no problem. He said, you just set a time that would have put you on the first row in the last race. we don't need to see if you can go any faster. Oh, right, okay.
That's pretty good.
So then Kessel offered me a drive in GT3. And the funny thing is that all race driver contracts, certainly for semi-pro or pro, have to go to Ferrari to be signed off. I think for the amateurs, they can be signed off at team level, but Ferrari have to sign off on all semi-pro or pro drivers. So mine went to Ferrari to be signed off. And the boss of Ferrari said, how have we ended up with a driver from Guernsey? And where is it?
I'm sure you've heard that more than once.
Yep. And that's how I ended up with Ferrari. You know, doesn't everyone?
I mean, look, it's a perfectly normal story. I mean, that's just what happens. And the best part was it was with the lovely team based out of Switzerland.
Yeah.
And the good humans attached to that. And I must say I popped in to see Ronnie when I was in Switzerland last year. And it's been a number of years since we've seen each other. And he welcomed me in and...
Class act.
Honestly.
They are class act. And for me, it was an easy decision because I was sent over there to do a job, and we had myself and two AMs for the start of the season, and we know we needed a fourth driver for the 24 hours at Spa. And so I said to Ronnie, look, I drove with a young Australian guy at Aston Martin, and I think he'd be just right for this. And Ronnie said, if you think he's good, then he's good. And I said to Liam, would you be interested in joining us at Kessel Ferrari for the Spa 24? And obviously he said, yeah.
He's like, bear shit in the woods?
Yeah.
Wow. So that's how that unfolded.
So that's how that happened. So here's me to thank for that.
Hey, mate, we do, interestingly enough, because that then leads into one of the most extraordinary stories with everything that happens next. Because that specific occasion, when, in terms of manufacturers, when Ferrari, a factory team, GT, and then at that circuit at Spa, I remember arriving there, and we enjoyed, we had all the celebrations, the parade lap, the take the cars into town, all the wonderful things. And the time of year, it was very warm, and I certainly recall a moment before race time where we were all having a beer down in the street, afternoon, sun setting, and you're just there going, how am I here?
Yeah.
Just extraordinary. And that race, to be there at that place at that time, like, to me, I'd never seen anything more extraordinary. One of the things I still recall is the, in particular, their fold-out catering truck. I'm still yet to see a better racetrack service than Kessel's fold-out restaurant out of their B-double.
Yeah. Well, you never saw Ferraris at Le Mans. Oh. Ferraris at Le Mans was 4 times that size.
They do things in a way that is superb.
Yeah.
Just special.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great event. I mean, I remember you, Liam and Dave in a motorhome right next to me, and, us having some fun, and it was...
pure shenanigans.
Yeah, it was a great time. Unfortunately, the race didn't go to plan.
The race did not go to plan, Marcus, and I think that's the the lead up of this story was it was the most magical time, because I remember, I think you guys had bloomin' Christmas cake or something ridiculous, and I certainly remember where you stole your washing line and a few other, just the pointless paddock shenanigans of limited consequence. But the problem with motorsport, and anybody who hangs around motorsport for long enough, things happen. And that was one of those days where things happened.
Yeah. You can never think about it beforehand as a driver. If you think something bad is going to happen to you, then you're in the wrong job and you should not be in the car. People have said to me, gosh, if you knew now what you should have known then, would you have got in the car? Yes, absolutely. Because that's what I was there to do, I was a race driver put in to do a job. And that's what I did. For those listening who don't know what happened, we were a few hours into the race. I was just about to get into the car for my first stint when the inbound driver had a bit of an off. And so he came in and things were delayed a little bit whilst they refettled the car in the pits, which threw us out of rhythm and, changed things a little, changed dynamics a little. I took the car out for my first stint. Early in the stint, it was clear that things weren't quite right, and my tyre pressure monitor said that I was losing pressure front left. Now, it's possible that was done before I went out and not picked up, or it's possible I picked up some carbon fibre, because there had been several accidents, especially at Radion on the climb out of Eau Rouge. So it's possible I picked up some carbon fibre. But anyway, I could see in the pressure monitor that I had the front left starting to go soft. So on the way down the circuit, on the back part of the circuit, I leant on that front left very hard. In right-hand corners, I was very aggressive. And I managed to bring the pressure back up. And I'd hoped that I'd stabilised it. However, I got down onto the bottom straight and I watched the needle start to go down again. So I knew that there was an issue. So I moved the car to the right-hand side of the circuit because we were approaching Blanchimont, which is a flat-out left-hander, or almost flat-out. And I knew with a soft front left I was compromised and I would not be able to take that corner at the same speed. So I'd moved offline to let the faster cars come through. Unfortunately, one of the drivers, for reasons known only to himself, was not paying attention and hit the rear of the Ferrari, turning me 90 degrees and firing me directly at the concrete barriers, which I hit well in excess of 150 kilometres an hour. I remember slamming the brakes, cranking the wheel, and I remember the concrete barrier coming at me ever so quickly. And then I don't remember too much for 6 months. I have snippets of memories. I certainly know what was going on, but to say that I have a full memory for 6 months would not be correct. I have, at best, probably 10 to 20% memory of what happened over the next 6 months. I know that physically I was not in a good way. I know that there was some brain damage, My neck was broken at C1. My lungs were damaged. My right shoulder, both hips, and various vertebrae in my back were broken. They believe that I had in excess of 15 G on impact because it ripped the neck hands device right out of the seat belts. And the hands devices are rated to 15 G without failing. So the hands device didn't fail, but it was pulled out from the seat. So Jackie Oliver, the XF1 driver, said, it means you were way in excess of 15 G. Not a great day. I know it was very, very traumatic for everybody else. Fortunately for me, my memory of the time not so good. Like I say, everything up until hitting the wall, sound. Remember absolutely everything. From then on, and even some of the things that I do remember, I've discussed with my wife Jo, and she said, never happened. Between the brain injury, because the front of my brain had taken quite a pounding, and the industrial drugs that they'd had to put me on to save my life, caused massive hallucinations. So things that I can remember clear as day never happened.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, you know, for you and Liam and Dave and Graham who were there at the circuit, I know it was a very traumatic time. For my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we weren't married, she had a call from my manager saying I had 12 hours, basically. So she dropped everything, left London, and got to Liège, to the hospital. I mean, the hospital was phenomenal. I mean, obviously it's a Formula One hospital, so they're used to dealing with severe trauma and high speed. And they had, you know, the fact that they had the rescue chopper there to take me straight away saved my life. But the extraction crew were top notch. You know, they performed a tracheotomy on me at the trackside because I wasn't breathing. So they opened me up and exposed my windpipe so that I'd continue to breathe, and then they got me into the chopper and got me to Liège Hospital. You know, I can't say enough for these guys. I owe them my life.
Was there also flame as well? Because I recall, was there any fire from the car, or were they able to get you out?
I don't know is the honest answer, because, you know, like I said, after the impact, I have no memory. I don't believe there was any fire because there were no burns to me. But it may be because they got me out quickly, because I crashed right in front of the medical centre. So they were straight over the wall and they had me out of the car right away. There were no burn marks on my crash helmet.
Because I remember, and maybe it was part of the trachea, because again I'm piecing things back together as well, because when we came, because we drove, we're basically following the chopper, not really sure where to go, but getting rough information because we didn't know what was happening, was what was unfolding on our side. I remember not seeing the car because I sort of keep an eye on how many minutes, and when I haven't seen the car for 30 minutes, you're going, oh, that's weird, and you start heading back because there were no comms that I had, and then I sort of started getting information going, we've got a serious problem here. And I met Joe that next morning in the reception area of the hospital there. And yeah, when we came in to see you that day, they had pipes into your lungs which probably explains the tracheotomy. And they basically said that it's not great was the initial. And I think this is I've never that weekend, that moment in time, that I don't know even how to explain this. I've always seen motorsport, and in particular 24-hour races, what I loved about them was you would see the entirety of human experience in a 24-hour period. The joy, the sadness, the exhaustion, the exhilaration, everything that you can feel as a human, I would experience throughout a race weekend. The very best, the very worst, pull yourself together, make it through. Just extraordinary. And you jam it into that place. Going from that glorious place where we were having a beer and cars in the town and driving the Ferrari, driving the race cars up on public roads, to then sitting and watching, my new friend and going, this is pretty fucked. It was the most severe example of motorsport that I've ever seen or experienced, and no doubt from your side too, as the poor bloke that gave the wall a little touch-up. I've never been able to move past that weekend. And what's weird, and what I probably can't figure out or explain, much the same as people have said to you, would you get in the car again? And we actually both said it at the same time. The answer is yes. Like, fuck yeah. There is nothing... There's something that I noticed in that world there. Motor racing is not glamorous. It is not sexy. Most of the time, it's actually not even fun. It's exhausting.
Yep.
And it is very difficult. But when you reach that level, where there are people who are there because of the recommendations of people such as yourself who have earned a place, every person there is because there's nowhere else that you would rather be. Like, whatever you got on, nah, I want to be here. There's nowhere else in the world I would rather be at this moment in time. And there's only a handful of people that know that feeling, because it's not getting there and the work you put in and the thousands of races and the shitty cars and the bad weekends and the good weekends and the money and all the things. What loony bin would go, oh yeah, absolutely, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do today, tomorrow, the next day, the day after that, and the day after that too. Even when it's fucking great and when it's fucking terrible. Like, if you said to me, we're going tomorrow, I'd be like, shit, yeah, we're going tomorrow. I can't explain that. And I can't explain, like, I don't know, and I don't understand it, nor do I have the words. And as a man that always seems to find the words, my experience being there with you, meeting your partner, coming to visit you through your recovery, the places, because we kept coming back to see you, because it was the motor racing that introduced us. But as with so many things, that stuff actually doesn't matter. It's the human being. And as I said, you're the Clive Cussler character. You are the living embodiment of magic, maximum chat, all these wonderful things. I looked at you and I went, this guy, he's got this whole game of life figured out. And the savagery of what we do was demonstrated in the most extreme form on that day. And it's one of those things that obviously changed the trajectory of your existence. But I've looked at, as I ponder, as I often do, but it a very similar thing. And then where our lives have sort of continued, and there's that bond, not dissimilar to the pressure cooker of those years that you went through, where no matter what happens in our lives, that place is a place that I hold forever. And, you know, my love for you as a friend, as a human being, as a kind, good man, I wouldn't replace that for anything, even with these horror things that we went through. And, you know, I know that these are things that have caused you, you know, ongoing grief. But that bond, and I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but this was something that I did want to share with you, was that even though we saw these things, and as you got 6 months there that you can't even quite put together, when we got the call to come back and have another go, I had in my mind that one picture of the trailing lights. And that picture had been in my mind since we were there the first time, where everything went so horribly wrong. And when we got to go back a second time, because I was like, well, fuck, we're never seeing this place again.
Yeah.
And back 12 months later, we were there again, and with some good company. I took that photo that I saw in my mind of the lights, and I realised the other day, I uploaded that photo, you know, your bloomin' Facebook banner things, in 2015. I've never changed it. That experience, that moment, that 12 months, that image, to me, that's all of life. So I talk about that experience of motorsport, the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, the redemption, the struggle, the finding your way back, like everything about our human experience, to me, exists in that image and that moment. I remember shooting it around midnight, and then I went and did my post-production that night in the little van in the paddock. And I can't explain it any further than that. It's just, that was my expression of the pain, the joy, the sorrow, the happiness. And the fact that I sit here with you in Wynnum, we're a pretty bloody long way from Belgium at this precise moment in time. Like, I feel forever blessed to be here, and it was part of why I've, you know, tapped at you and badgered you a little bit, because again, all the glorious people, you know, they're never comfortable with sharing their stories. But, you know, your and my story is one that to me is forever intertwined. And the gratitude I have that you are comfortable to share with me, you know, the good, the bad, and everything else. Again, mate, always in here.
Oh, thank you ever so much. Do you realise in a few weeks it will be 10 years?
I think that's even more extraordinary. I really can't, to be honest, because that's wild.
Yeah.
Because off the back of, you know, as I come out of my therapy session here with you, after that 6 months where they were basically just zip tying and gaff taping you back together to some sense of functionality, I remember visiting you. We were in the UK, and it had
Salisbury.
nice gardens.
Yeah.
And we sat outside together, and you were able to string sentences together a bit better
Yeah.
by this point in time. But you were still a long way to go.
Yeah.
How was that process?
Ups and downs. Yeah, there'd be days when I felt really pretty good that, I was normal and healed. And then I'd go to do something or try to do something and I'd realise far from it. I think the most difficult thing for me, being a race driver, I wanted to be in a race car. And probably for the first 2 years after the shunt, I was desperate to get into a race car. And if I'd had the opportunity, I would have. And I wouldn't have thought about anybody else. I would have got in a race car. And then after a couple of years, I started to become more comfortable with who I am now, which is not the same person as I was before the shunt. And as I became more comfortable with who I am now, so the urge, the need to get into a race car decreased. And I thought more about my loved ones and what it would do to them if I were to get into a race car again. I'm thinking specifically of Joe, but, also of my family, of Liam, of you, of everybody who knows me, what it would do to them if I were to get into a race car again. And I began to think about that, and so I realised that getting into a race car was not important to me. And now if somebody said, hey, would you like to do a lap of the circuit in a race car? I'd say, no, thank you. No. Because I know physically and mentally I'm not up to it these days. 10 years out of a race car doesn't mean you can automatically get back in one and be handy again. But I've got no desire to see my loved ones put through the mental ringer of knowing I've got back in a race car. So that was the hardest thing. And when I tried to tell people what it was like, I've never done drugs. Just not part of me, not who I am. But I suspect that a heroin addict who was in hospital after an overdose and is told by a doctor, one more hit and you could die. That's what I was like. I knew, and the doctors had told me, your neck will not survive another accident because it's all bolted together. But I knew for that first couple of years, if I could have got in a car, I would have, knowing that it could kill me. And I suspect that's what a heroin or cocaine addict is like. And so racing is no different from any other addiction.
It is one and the same, isn't it?
Yeah. And a race driver is no better than a cocaine addict.
Oh,
he doesn't
absolutely.
worry about what his addiction does to his loved ones. All he worries about is getting another fix. And that's what I was like. But I'm here to tell you that there is life after racing. I have 2 beautiful boys now. We live in glorious Wynnum, where I absolutely adore it. I'm a full-blooded Australian and definitely a Queenslander. And by the way, go Maroons. I love everything about being here. It's given us a new lease of life. The doctors in Europe said, live somewhere warm. It's going to be better for you as you get older. Same way they did to Barry Sheen. Barry Sheen lived in Australia after all his motorbike accidents for that reason. But it's just turned out to be the best move we ever made. I love it here. All my, the people I consider my friends are here, my loved ones. Europe is somewhere I go to visit now. It's not my home. If someone says to me, "Where are you from?" I say, "Wynnum." And they say, "Surely not with that accent." I said, "Well, originally I'm not, but I am now."
And just in case anybody wasn't sure about your commitment to Australiana, you are also the proud owner of your very own Commodore.
One of the very last commies ever made. The final run of HSV Club Sport R8s. Mine is number 48 of 350.
What a car. What a car. What a man. It's amazing how many lives you can jam into one lifetime, Marcus.
Yeah, I guess I'm a bit like a cat, really.
Oh, bloody hell, mate. You got to talk to me about whatever big guy you're praying to, because shit, Brooky's been listening to you. Because, Marcus, the fact that you've then, so Joe, who was your girlfriend, you solved that problem and you went, we're going to have to make sure that
she doesn't get away.
Absolutely, and go this loony bin. And then the fact that you found your way here, moving to Australia, moving to Wynnum, with your family here, and now raising, and we're sitting in your shed, not too far from your home.
Yeah.
With the Commodore just down below us. Because I thought we'd set up here because he's got the cool check tiles and, all the, if you're watching this, you'll see all the selection of race suits behind us. But before we wrap up, the man of mayhem that you are, you have somehow managed, despite all your shenanigans and your commitment to not doing silly things, you've managed to get your hands on a few old warbirds. Marcus, can you tell me who you met out cycling and talked into this? Because, mate, that's insane all by itself.
Well, some of it's just, again, pure luck. I have a friend here who's ex-Australian Air Force, and I was doing some work up at Caboolture at the museum. There's a chap there who has a couple of aircraft, and he's ex-Australian Air Force. And it turns out that my friend and this guy knew each other and were roommates together when they were in the Air Force. And so, he said, "Hey, look, why didn't you come and fly my aircraft?" So I took his aircraft out for a fly and, just had a blast. And I thought, perhaps I'm not 100% ready to quit flying just yet. So I had a look around to see what else interesting I could find. And right next door at Caboolture was a company that flies biplanes. And so I got in contact with them, and I ended up flying all of their stuff. And, there's a car show this Sunday at Caboolture. A quick plug for the show. And they've offered me a spot at 9 o'clock to fly the Stearman, beautiful little yellow and blue biplane, out of the air show and do a circuit and come back in. And great, doesn't that happen to everyone?
Perfectly normal. What does Jo think about the planes?
She likes it. She thinks it's good for me cerebrally. I think keeping one's brain ticking over and challenged is very important. So, the flights do challenge me. I also, I'm a volunteer up at Queensland Air Museum in Caloundra, and that is great. So I often work on a Saturday there, showing people around the aircraft. Some, quite a few of which I've flown, and so that gets me out meeting people, and because there's lots of aviation stories with people up there to share and trade around. So yeah, I've enjoyed rekindling my love affair with aviation over the last year, 18 months.
It's been extraordinary to watch. I've got to tell you, I just laugh that classic, this bloke, the glint in his eye, he manages to find the lending library of vintage aircraft and go, do you need somebody to take things out for a little spin around the block for you? I know a thing or two about them. You go, you're a man of mayhem. Magic, in fact. Magic in this bloke. Because it fills me with joy to watch. And even as you talked about it, I saw the sparkle. And that is the same sparkle that my grandfather, as he always talked to me about the planes. You just see the eyes light up and you go, because again, he was the same. He's like, I can't believe people pay me to do this. Like, this is ridiculous. I go, I'll do this for free. And to see you here in this place with the things that you've had to work through, because it's no accident. You've had to work very hard. And to watch you put in all that effort despite all the struggles, to still have a smile on your face, like it's just a credit to the man that you are. And again, I think you're a very special human being, mate, and that's why I so desperately wanted to talk to you. I so desperately wanted to squeeze this story out of you, because I'm very confident that it will be more than just you and me that will enjoy this. There's a couple of lives you've touched along the way, buddy.
Well, thank you ever so much. It's very kind of you.
And see the humility. You don't know how to take that compliment, do you, mate?
As I said before we started this recording, I really don't believe that there'll be too many people interested in listening to what some old boy waffles on about.
Some old boy that waffles on. Mate, you got pretty bloody good stories. I'm going to wind us up because I'm fairly confident that I've given you a good nudge of your time today. Marcus, I am so grateful that you have been willing to share the time and the stories with me. I'm beyond grateful, my friend, because as I said, our lives, whether they're heavily or separately intertwined, they are forever bonded. And you're a very special man, and I am delighted to be a small part of your story, my friend, because I feel very fortunate to be in your orbit.
That's incredibly generous. Thank you ever so much.
Well, I'm going to wrap it up here because you don't go sharing these things on the internet, so I don't need to direct anybody. But you can give some cheap plugs to to where you volunteer if you like. So if people would like to come and talk stories with you,
Queensland Air Museum in Caloundra. I'm quite often there on a Saturday morning, showing people around the aircraft.
So if you do listen to this and then you go and see Marcus, make sure you tell him. Well, buddy, on that note, I'm going to wind it up. Thank you, mate. Thank you for sharing this with me.
You're more than welcome. Thank you ever so much for having me on.
And to all you lovely people that have made it here to the end, as always, be kind to yourself.